Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and today our first impressions video is going to have a look at this Schnellboot, the Type S-38 from Italeri. It's 1/35 scale, which means it's too big for my model desk. Well, at least for videoing, maybe even for building. We'll have to see. Okay, so the kit number is 5620. And my understanding, if you look at the top left, it says fully upgraded molds. My understanding is when this was re-released in 2017, that they'd done some significant work on improving it. I have no idea when it was first released. Maybe when we have a look inside, we'll get an idea as to whether it's a relatively old kit or not. Anyway, it tells us that there's more than 600 parts, that there's a clear sheet, a photo etch sheet, and we've got decals to allow for 3 different variants to be built. And the artwork shows her chugging through the water. It's quite a nice little picture actually. On the side of the box, we've got the length of the model. We've got a quick overview of the paints required. Calling out the Italeri acrylic paint system. We have a little bit of history, and then we have the clear sheet, the decals, and the photo etch sheet. The sides of the box repeat that information, and then as we come around this side of the box, we've got some photographs of the actual built model, which is always nice. Highlighting where some of the photo etch is. Tells you it's for 14 and above, that's because of the photo etch. And there we have the box. So when we open the box, the lid of the box is actually really flimsy. Considering how big this is, it's a very flimsy box. Now this came to me in the post, and it was in another box which had come directly from Italeri. So it was one box inside another box, which was quite a thick gauged corrugated box and was actually well protected. So certainly that's how it gets to the retailer, and the retailer can pass it on like that. Actually, there's quite a bit of space in the box. We have these corrugated, which are loose, and there's quite a lot of movement in there. So it's not the best package box I've ever seen. So removing those 2 cardboard inserts, and what we can see is that the hull pretty much takes up the full length of the box. We've got a bag with the plastic parts in, and then we appear to have another box in there, which again has got a fair amount of travel. Right, let's have a look at the hull. So the hull is telling me 2 things instantly. Firstly, this is a big model. I mean, it is really big. And secondly, it's also originally quite an old model. Look at the riveting there. That tells you that this is probably late 60s, early 70s maybe. That will all want to come off and be reapplied. Now if I start at the bow, we can see we've got quite a bit of rivet detail in that area, and around what will be where the torpedo tube comes out. Again, it probably all wants coming off and putting back on, just because it looks so untidy. We've got some nice detail on the lower hull, and we've got the bump strips and things in place, which is nice. And we've got some lovely detail around here. It's very nicely moulded. All looks very good. I'd have to understand what all of those are. There is a bit of sink there. nothing major. And the stern, the transom, is a separate part. We can see there's some fairly heavy connection points. This was obviously on some sprue when manufactured that they removed before they put it in the box. Let's just see if there's some detail on the other side. Yes, there is. Small amount of detail there. And we can see quite a huge connecting point that will need cleaning up. But nothing that's too difficult. Comparing the two hull halves together here, we can see that it fits together using connection points, but interestingly, as we go along the keel, every other one is a male and then a female, but on the other half, on part 2, they're all female, so there must be some connecting rods or something that goes in. So let's fish out the instructions and go through the instructions, and then we can come back to these parts because that's quite intriguing. Right then, instruction manual. I'm pleased to say that fits on my desk, so normal service is resumed. We have a very thick, really meaty A4 but landscape stapled instruction manual, and we have 56 steps depicted. If I look at the back, here we have a little bit of history in different languages, and then when we open it up we have our part count, so showing all the various different parts. Seems like we've got some fasteners and cord and bits and pieces attached in there, and then we've got our paint shout out here, so there's several colours suggested, all being from the Italeri paint range. So you can see quite a few parts, and then we start step 1, and interestingly there is no reference to the fact that the fastening points, some of them are female to female, so I find that quite fascinating. We are building up some hull supports which have nuts in to allow for mechanically fastening along the top portion. Then the female to female is because we've got mechanical fasteners going through, so you can just about make out there we have a screw going through, and then there's a plastic cap that goes over the top, so you can see that's going through at the bottom, so that's where those female to female parts go. Okay, there's also some trimming to be done, so some detail to remove. Okay, in step 2 we have the transom being built up, and we've got a section of the lower hull to go in with the rudders fitted, so that's quite interesting. They should be movable then, I guess, and then the transom piece to go on, and then they're telling us to paint the lower hull and put it on the display stand, and I can see that the decal is going to include the Italeri logo, so I already don't like that. Then we're building up the shaft lines, the propellers, and putting those on. I've got to say the drawings are nice and clear, they're big, you've got lots of space for making notes around them if you wish. It's all very clear, so I can see why the books are big. The nice big pictures. We've got a picture there which shows the propellers and their orientation, so yeah, that's interesting. Because obviously they need to be rotating in a different direction. And then we flip over step 6 and we're putting those torpedo tubes in, which makes sense obviously before we can put decks in. So 2-part torpedo tube, and then I think that is a photo etch part that goes around the top, and then some another plastic component locking it all into place. And then we carry on with the torpedo tubes, building up the doors. So hinges need building up, and obviously they will be movable. So that's just a repeat of that. And then we are starting work on the sort of main deck, which goes in from the stern. There's some drilling to do and some bits to remove. So clearly that's from the original mould. Okay, there's a clear instruction there. Obviously some things have changed since the original moulding of this kit. So then we're putting the deck in, and again that's installed using self-tapping screws there and there, so we can see that. Let's see. So at all of these points we've got little self-tapping screws holding it in. So that can be a double-edged sword. It means that you're going to have a nice strong fit because you'd also glue it as well. But if you over tighten them, sometimes they can distort. So you do have to be careful with that sort of thing. And we've got a number of parts going on. Difficult to tell what they are from the picture. Then we have the back end of the torpedo tubes going in. Okay, so that mounts onto the deck that we've just installed. That's why we're doing it there. And we've got some form of tread plate. That must, well, that says part 34 PE, so that'll be a photo etch part. So that's the little tread plates, foot plates going on. And then we've got the foredeck, which again needs a little bit of drilling out and a little bit of trimming. And then we have two options, a variant with a gun and a variant without a gun. So if you're going to be using the gun, which I think I probably would be, then you need to put this gun tub in underneath before the deck's installed. Or you've got a blanking plate. As we flip over to step 12, looks quite a busy step this, but what we're doing is there's a lot of detail work going into building up this effectively a skylight. We've got ammunition being placed around where the gun is going to go and the railings for the gun. So if you've put the gun tub in, that's what you do. I guess, well, it says version with the gun, I guess you've got holes that you'd have to fill or something if you're not putting the gun in. I'm not sure. So we've got more PE parts going on, looks like little grills, building up the doors, again, photo etch parts going on, hinges. We seem to have hinges that allow for open as well as closed. And then in step 13 we're putting on things like the spare anchor, boat hooks, some railings, little bits and pieces basically, all adding to the detail. That's nice. And then we install the deck. So I suspect that some of this stuff for installing you could do after the deck's installed, just in case there's any sanding. Makes no sense to build these parts up when you might have to do some filling and sanding. So anything that doesn't need to be attached from underneath, I would put on after the deck's been put in place. And again, mechanical fasteners which they do a good job of covering up. Okay, and at step 15 we start building up the bridge. So we've got dials with decals, got what looks like quite a busy little operating area there with the controls for the engines, and so that all builds up and then goes in as a sub-assembly. Yeah, that's interesting. And then I'm going to guess this is the sides. So we've got radio equipment, we've got armoured windows, we've got voice pipes, that's good. Observation equipment, which is nicely detailed with some photo etch. Very nice. So we're putting that together with the wooden decked floors. More photo etch going in, so that we've really got some nice details going in at 135 scale. That should look really authentic. Depends on how well these are moulded, how good this lot looks. Shame that we've got a fixed door. Anyway. Right, and then that goes in as a sub-assembly there. So we have a bridge, and then we have this observation deck behind it, and then that is the rear bulkhead. Okay. Now we're building the sides, and that does have a separate door, so that's good. And we've got some glazing going in, so I'm interested to see how that works. Do we have to cut it out, or whether it's pre-cut for us? We've got life rings, grab handles, lamps, yeah, separate handles and things for the doors, so that should be all okay. Some photo etch there, and I think that is just a repeat for the other side. And then when we're in step 21, we're putting those two side pieces in and building up the front area of the bridge. So we've got the forward windows there. See, they're built up. There's quite a bit of detail there, including the ventilation for them, which is really nice to see. I've not missed that off. And then we've got the roof going on there. Yeah, all lovely. Again, we're going to have to see how well these are moulded with all those rivets and things. More windows. I think these might be die cut, so you just need to cut a tab to get them out possibly, because there's no instruction about cutting them. And then we've got, looks like we've got options here for both skylight windows and drilling holes for fixing things on the roof. Have a problem with fruit flies at the moment, so apologies if they keep coming across the camera. Just the time of year. So we've spent quite a bit of time building up this area, and we're still putting more in. So we've got another bulkhead going in, and that room is being divided into two before the roof goes on. So we need to find out what's inside those if possible, and we probably got some additional detail to scratch, because I'm guessing one would possibly be a map room, something like that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to know what was in there and see what could be built up, because that looks like it's just being left as empty rooms, but you can see through the windows, so I'm sure there's some detail to be added there if we can find out what's in there. Okay, step 25, and we are building up a thing. I have no idea what that is. No doubt someone could tell me. Is it the back end of the torpedoes? Could be the back end of the torpedo tube. Yeah, quite possible. Then we're building another one, and yes, then we're fitting it at the back end of the torpedo tube. So, okay, that looks suitably busy, doesn't it? So yeah, quite like that. Again, it's really clear that you know, big pictures with not a lot going on in them, nice and easy to follow. Step 28, and that's just a repeat of what we've done on the other side. Step 29, we're adding more photo etch. So this is strips of rivets, so that's nice. We're adding some surface detail. We've got another skylight going on, some mushroom vents. Lovely. And then as we get to step 30, we're putting on navigation lamps and more photo etch detail. Yeah, more frames around some of the glazing, so it'll look really authentic and built up as the window would have been built up, which is quite interesting. Then we've got these top windows, which are really just a bit of protection from the wind, to be honest, because that's an open deck. But we can see that it's photo etch being folded over transparencies film, so that's nice. 32, and we are now adding detail to that roof. So we've got more of this wood slats that's used for standing on, and look like seats going on into the interior there. There's a mounting for something, maybe a light machine gun perhaps, or a searchlight indeed. Look at the searchlight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. So clear lens, photo etch front, so some nice detail going in there. And then we've got this sort of, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's like a framework so you can get up without falling off, and it's got a chain, so it's almost like the entrance to the roof, if you like. Radio antenna being built up, so that's nice, and goes in at the back there, and then some more pipe work and bits and pieces, so that'll just add to the authentic look of it. Yeah, very nice. Lots of detail around here. Then we've got a vent with some foot plates on, another skylight lid, sort of like a hatch lid. Got a vent with a photo etched grill, so that'll look authentic. That goes on that back bulkhead there, one on each side. Then we've got another standing area that is being built up, one on each side again, outside of those vents. It's a really busy area. That front of the ship is very busy, isn't it? A lot of parts going into that. Right, that's all handles. So that's all handles for all the skylights, and they look like plastic, so each one of those are going to have seams on for cleaning up. That'll be fun. And then we're building up, well, this is the holders for the torpedoes. You can see how the torpedo would fit in there, so it's building up there and it's showing you orientation there. So it's nice. They've not, you know, they've not skipped through the instructions. They've given you the detail that you need. More hatches being built up. Different type of skylight stroke ventilators going up there. So we've got three different, well, the same style, but we've got going in 3 places. More grab rails. Some form of wind protection around that hatch. Then we've got inflatables. Looks like we're building up one. It's got some plastic rings on it, and it's showing you how to tie the rope work around that, so that will look very authentic when done. And then we're adding more vents, some form of box locker of some type. Then we've got more of the wood slat deck. That looks like it's hinged, so you could have it up or down possibly, and that sits on some posts, so it's a raised deck. We've got some depth charges and more vents going on. It is such a busy model. And then on the back end, ignore the fruit fly, we've got more handrails, ventilators, looks like galley chimney. Not quite sure what they are. Are they smoke generators maybe? Couple of life, or a life ring to go at the back there. Then we're building up the torpedoes, of which there is 4 to go on those racks that we built up. And then there's some photo etch to go on top to hold them in place. Quite an involved model actually. Going to take a little bit of time to work through that. More photo etch strapping. Then the railings go in, so these will be plastic, and they would be tarpaulin covered really, so might have to look at that, but it looks like we've got fixed rail and chain all moulded into one, so we might be able to replace the chain at that scale possibly, make that look a bit more authentic. Right, and then we've got stanchion posts and rope. We've got thread that goes through that to give us a more authentic look around the stern areas of the ship, so that's interesting. And then some more fittings, boat hooks and the like. And then finally in step 52 we start building up the big gun, and then we mount that in the front. So we've got, we must be making 2 because there's also one going in the stern there as well. And then finally we've got some rigging to go on, small amount of rigging. Wow, very involved. So we get a separate paint chart, which is fairly nicely printed. It looks like pale blue, but actually it's supposed to be a light grey, this. Obviously it's calling out their own brand of paint, but the paint options that have been given are pretty much all the same, but with different decal options. And it's a little bit disappointing in a way, because there are a number of options they could have gone for, which would have had all sorts of camouflage schemes. So it might be worth doing some research and seeing whether you want to try and get a camouflage scheme and make your own markings for it possibly. But it shows you exactly what everything needs to be. It doesn't point out the numbers or anything. It's just look at the photograph and cross-reference with your paints. The thing that's a bit tricky is that not all of the colours in here are represented there. So you try and find that rubber dinghy colour in there. No, I couldn't either. But it does tell you where to place the decals. And then if we go over the side, we've got a couple of close-ups with the alternative decals. So inside the box that was contained in there with all the parts, we get this bag which has 2 different types of thread on. A very fine one which will be used for the railings, and then a thicker one which gets used for a number of different things, but primarily for the rubber boat. And then we have all those mechanical fastenings which are used for holding the hull and decks together. We also have a second bag, and in there are all the other components. So we've got the photo etch, and we've got the decals, and we've got the clear parts. Now, when we were going through the instructions, we could see that the clear parts were being shouted out, and no reference to cutting them, and that's because I've got them here. They are die cut. They also appear to be mounted on some form of backing, so you can peel them off and then use them. So that's a really nice touch. I like that. The decals, they're a little thick, but they're not too bad. Doesn't say who's manufactured them. Oh yes, it does. I beg your pardon. Printed by Sanchetti Bucanesco in Italy. Anyhow, we have this one, which I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to be. Looks like some strange Disney character. And then we've got this one, which is a squirrel nibbling on the Soviet Union. And then we've got this Ace of Hearts logo with a lucky horseshoe. We've got a flag, not very usable, because they've not given you the components you need to make up the swastika in the middle. Then we have the compass and some of the dials for inside the bridge, and then we've got the two a little bit disappointing that these are for the stand, and we've got the manufacturer's logo on there, which personally I don't want. We might be able to paint that out. We've got what it is and a copy of the badge, which I really like, but underneath it tells you it's 1/35 scale. So we might look at trying to paint those out and gloss coat it, and maybe we could, I don't know, replace it with a heart or something, I don't know, or a flag. And then we have their threat of photo etch, and it tells me that it's made by Photo Meccaniccia, which I'm guessing is Italian. They say that they're the first choice underneath. And what I will tell you is it's very thick as photo etch goes. Not the thickest I've ever seen, but it's good, strong photo etch that. So we can see all those parts that we were looking at. We've got the finest parts being the parts for the guns. So we've got the little targets on the guns there, the little range finding targets. We've got lots of bits for the windows that we saw, the little foot plates, the grills for the various lamps, and the bits for the openings of the various hatches. So when you see in the instructions, they look more fiddly than they actually are when you come across them in real life. Let me put it on there. Yeah, that's some nice photo etch actually. So this is the pot that it is basically the gun tub, and it has a bit of a strange pattern at the bottom. It looks like a brick wall. I'm guessing it's supposed to be wood planks, but they're quite short. You've also got some ejector pin marks on them, which will show up on paint, so there's something needed to be done with the floor of that, and I suspect it might be that we put a new one in on top. Now all the sprues come in separate bags, but even though they're in separate bags, I do have some parts that are broken off, and that is probably because of how loose they are in the box. So we've got an end of a depth charge there. We've got one of the navigation lamps, the propeller shaft, bracket and a handrail that have all broken off. They're all okay, but it's not great that parts are breaking off. Okay, so after the hull, two hull halves, the main deck is the next largest piece. So actually, as I look at this, the moulding on it is actually very nice and crisp. However, the actual deck itself is very uneven. Can you see the lumpy bumpy on that? So there's lots of detail underneath, holes that possibly need drilling out and things like that. This is where the mechanical fasteners will go through, and we've got all sorts of undulations in the deck. So it's going to need a little bit of a sand to level it down. We've got some imperfections as well. Some of these parts we remove and replace with photo etch, but actually aren't too bad in their own right. And then some of these, we've got like circular lumps there for nuts, so we really want to remove all those and replace those with hexagon nuts, which we can do. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's a good thick piece of plastic. Everything is moulded crisply. There's no, other than the slight undulation in the deck, there's no massive sink or anything to sort. There's some seam lines there, they're quite light. So just a gentle sanding will sort out all those minor issues, and then this takes you to this is where the bridge area builds up. So yeah, so we then have some more deck to go at the front. But yeah, it's I don't know if there'll be more detail on this or not. We need to have a look at our references. There's some raised lines where items go. Probably all right to sand those off as long as you know where things are going further in the build. Yeah, have no issues with that. Now this is sprue C, and we've got the rudder, we've got the termination point for the torpedoes there that sits in there, and then if you remember we build up that back piece that plugs in. We've got, this is the forward part of the deck, and we've got the same issue that we had on the other deck where it's a bit lumpy where there's other things underneath, so a little bit of sanding needed there, and sink all the way around that, so probably some fill and sink. These little triangles, it might be that we need to replace those with some plastic card because of the amount of fill and sand we're going to have to do there. What does look good, however, is the rivets. They're nicely in line, not like the ones on the two hull halves. They look much better. Yeah. So yep, I'm alright with that. And then we have, that's our transom, so there's nothing really on there, it's featureless. And then that's our little bit of hull at the stern there that the transom marries onto. So again, it's all sharp, there's no real issues with that. Then we have this roof section that goes down the centre bit of the main deck. So all of these are skylights, and we have some photo etch components to put on those, and handles and bits and pieces. And again, there's no real issues with this either. My only real observation is that this sort of walkway here, which is wooden slats, it's very thick at the ends, so that would have been hollow. So if we turn underneath, we can see if we remove it, we make an opening, and we'd have to then fill it with some plastic card. But I think that might be the way to go there, to add a bit of realism to that. Remove this and then replace it with some actual wooden slats maybe. and we could possibly do the same with that, although that's not got the same issue because it's following the contour of the shape of the roof. But everything's nice and tidy in its moulding process. There's no real flash on this or anything. It's not bad at all. Okay, so next sprue out, I can't find, oh there it is, sprue E. So what we've got, get all of that in shot, yeah we can. We've got torpedo tubes. We've got what looks like the door for the torpedo tubes. We've got little fittings like the boat hooks and stuff like that. We've got a very lifelike looking life ring with a moulded on rope. I mean, we could replace that for some of the rope included in the kit. But actually that looks quite lifelike, although there's quite a lot of seam on it. We've got parts here for the guns, ammunition holders. We've got, I'm not quite sure what those are. Deck fittings, we've got some form of wooden blocks, wooden wedges or something there. Binocular equipment. Some of the handrails, and then we've got two of the stand components which are pretty beefy. Yeah, have no issues with that. There's some heavy seams, but it's not flash. Nothing's damaged. There's some really bad sink in that part there. Really bad sink there. But other than heavy seams, there isn't really any issues. Now the rivets on there have got all sorts of little mould lines, so again we might have to see what that looks like under paint and maybe modify that. Now for some reason that I'm not sure of, sprue G is a different colour. Even the letters in a different format, so I don't know if this is an old sprue or a new sprue or quite what there is for that, but we have some loose parts, and I think the gun tub was connected to that at one point, and maybe removed in the factory. Anyway, we've got the ship's wheel, which has some nice turned detail on it. We've got the back end of the torpedo tubes there. The propeller is hefty bit of kit. We've got some of the vents, more wood planking. This isn't, some of this is, of the slats have got gaps. This one doesn't have. Compass platform. One of those sort of vent skylights that we saw. We've got the voice pipes there, they look quite nice. Some of the equipment for inside of the bridge, the radio equipment there and what have you. So sprue D now, and there's some really nice parts on here. I particularly like the seats, which have got the little holes in, what I call tractor seats. They look really authentic. We've got some shells, we've got ammunition cases. What looks like, well, it'll be a hand wheel, but it actually looks like a truck steering wheel. That'll be the mount for the gun, the stand. So this is all gun related. There's the two halves there. Yeah, and all big enough to carefully build and paint and weather and really get the best out of it. This part here, whatever it is, has a lot of sink in the top there. And there's quite a bit of heavy seam rather than flash. And that seems to be the theme, quite a lot of heavy seam on the parts. So sprue H has a lot of large gaps in it, and so I guess these are components that were taken out and replaced. And again, the colour's slightly different and the sprue format slightly different. So I think this is part of what's left of the original parts that they deemed were okay. And you know, we have a big wood slat area which has actually got a little bit of texture on those planks. There's the bit that hinges up, if you remember we saw in the instructions. Not sure I like the rivets on that, which is that sort of box that we saw. We've got the oars and some railings, and then crucially we've got the rubber inflatable, which actually looks quite nice. I can see why they decided to keep that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So sprue F is another sprue that I think has predominantly the old original kit parts in it. And they're all actually quite nice. Again, we've got heavy seam, in fact a little bit of flash in places, but it's minor. In the build process, in the instructions, there's a lot of removing bits to replace with etch, and I can see why. They're a bit soft moulded, some of the windows. But a lot of it is quite serviceable. Might be tempted to replace the ladder. It doesn't look too bad from that angle, but very chunky at the back, so that might be up for a replacement. But otherwise, we've got some interesting detail. I mean, we could remove these bits of pipe work and replace them with wire, and that would look a bit more authentic. Or you can scrape underneath and just round them off a little bit, which would do the same job. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of parts here, but there's no issues with them really. A little bit of sink in the door near the handles. Again, nothing too bad to sort out. If I turn it over, we've got quite a lot of ejector pin marks. All easy to fill or sand off, I think. Nothing there that would be too difficult. And of course, we don't know how visible some of these are, but some of these bulkheads are visible on both sides. There we have it. Sprue D now, and the noticeable item on here is the torpedoes, and actually don't they look lovely. Ever so slightly soft moulded, but you know what, they look really nice. And then we've got the fittings for them, so the propellers are actually quite thin. We've got, again, the rudder section is all nicely thin as well, and then we've got the components for building up the racks. Then we've got the railing section here with the chain. Actually, the chain looks really quite good, although I think replacing it would improve it. Then we can see all these little handles for all those lots and lots of skylights, and as I suspected, a fair amount of clean up on them all, so quite a bit of work on them. And there's more of them there. And then we've got There's a couple of helmets there, I notice. They've got a bit damaged. Then we've got parts for the hull, the propeller shafts. I think those are the support pipes that we put in the inside of the hull to hold the nuts that we screw into. Then we've got those individual stanchions for stringing up at the back. See that there. Another propeller, more deck fittings, and part of the stand. Now we have 2 Ds, so when you look at all these handles, we've got double that amount. And that actually is it for the plastic parts in the kit. Lots and lots of nice detail, all well done for the scale. Some of it a bit simplified, but all of it usable really. It's just a matter of cleaning them up and deciding how you want to weather and portray them. Now, there wasn't a huge amount of aftermarket made for this particular model, but we have got some of it. And the first thing I want to share is the crew. So you will have noticed there was no figures in there, but Atari did do a set of figures that you could buy separately if you wanted. And on the front of the box here, we've got some lovely pictures showing what they could look like. Now, this is the different version of the Schnellboot. But yeah, we get all of those. And then there's a paint guide on the back, again with Atari paint colours. So let's have a look inside and see what they look like. So what we get inside is a single sprue of figures. And as I look at them, wow, there's some very nice detail. There's not much in the way of seam lines on them. And there's some lovely facial expressions. Look at that guy. So yeah, we've clearly got some defined roles in here. So we've got a radio operator. We've got, I imagine, the captain, given what his headgear looks like. We've got someone clearly working on the gun. So yeah, some nice figures, and some of them have they've all got posable separate arms by the looks of it, and some of them have got separate legs and some haven't. So there's a variety there. We've got more helmets. So yeah, and the guy with the funny expression on his face has got the binoculars, so he's clearly spotted something that we should be aware of. But yeah, they don't look too bad at all, actually. We've also got this little, well, pamphlet in there, which shows you how to build them up. Basically put the arms where the arms go and the legs where the legs go, and you probably can't go too far wrong. And they are grouped as their figure on the sprue. And then on the back we've got a suggestion of their positions. So 2 seated on the gun, 2 stood either side. We've got 2 there on the superstructure, I think on possibly even another gun there. And then you've got someone walking down the side. You've got the captain on the open bridge, another gunner at the front, and the radio operator also on the open bridge. So yeah, I quite like that. It's going to add a little bit of animation to the model, which is something I always like. If we can do it, we should. Also, we have some additional etch which came from Edward. So first thing is that we have a steel flag to replace the decal flag. So I quite like their steel flags. So that's a really handy addition. And then there is 2 sets for the Schnellboot, one called hatches and one just called Schnellboot. So we'll have a look at the hatches first. So we've got a sheet of photo etch and more transparencies, and these are definitely thinner than the ones provided by in the kit. So we'll just put them to one side. The photo etch is a lot thinner than the kit provided photo etch as well. And what we can see here is we've got all sorts of strips with rivets on. We've got these little raisable caps, and we've got separate hinge fittings, little loops there. Not quite sure what they are, but we'll look at the instructions in a sec. So, I mean, they all look nice. We've even got something there that says spare, so some spare rivets, which is good. If I flip it over, we can see that there's a lot of folding to do to make these little boxes up. So let's have a look at the instructions. So what we're doing is replacing some of the hatches and hatch doors, so that's nice. That gives us something to play around with. We are using the kit part handles, however. So it's the same basic principle: make a box, make a frame outside of the frame, and glue it all down. It will be a little bit time consuming. These ones here have the glass bit in, and therefore you'll be able to have them open or closed. Same with that. Yeah, using plastic rod to make the hinges there. So all sorts of stuff there. So, and then the little locking eye loops on them all. So quite a bit of detail actually. And you could show these in the open position if you wanted, but you'd have to be mindful that you'd be looking down into an empty void in the ship. So you probably don't want to do that. But yeah, really interesting. Gives us some animation options, which, like I say, I do like. Okay, so in the main set, we get 2 frets, and we'll have a look at this small one first. So this small one is the pre-coloured etch, and we've got a set of dials which actually have a really lovely glossy front face, so they look the part, and then that cover will go over the top. We've got photo etched compasses, front of the radio set, and some switches to go on the top of that, and dials, so that will look really nice in there. Yeah, happy with that. And then we have this main set here. Now that's interesting. So we've got remember the little raised triangles on the deck that said you might need to remove them and make them out of plastic cards so we can sand the deck? Looks like we have photo etch replacements, so that is perfect. We've got a winch with chain on, like a bike chain. We've got some different type of waffle pattern that look like ventilator covers. Not quite sure what they are. All sorts of riveted rings, which I'm going to guess go on these things. We've got some flash lamp covers, different grating covers, and new hatches by the looks of it. Let's have a look at the instructions and work out what these are. So, single sheet of instructions. So These pieces here are going on the front face of the hull and replace the area that actually didn't have rivets on, and we're going to add a load of rivets, so that's nice. And then we've got some plates that go on the inside, adding some detail onto some of the existing parts. We have a door for inside the gun tub, and a ring that goes as the centre of the mount. We even have a little handle to make up there. More replacement handles. These waffle plates seem to be going on the deck, so replacing or in addition to the plastic part. And then it says here 40 pieces of these little triangles. So that's going over each one of the stanchion points there. I assume that goes all the way through to the front as well. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So 40 for the rear, 18 for the front. So that's nice. We've got some replacement parts for the back end of the torpedo tube. Replacement part to cover up an area on the bulkhead, which is nice, and some steps to go on it. Some rivet strip to go on the front deck. Those are the little boxes for holding the ammunition around the gun. We've got some clasps which replace the plastic moulded on ones, and then we've got some little components there. You seem to be building something out of plastic card there, so I'm not quite sure what that is. There's quite a bit of additional detail for inside the bridge as well. So we've got new hinges and handles with the radio set that we've just seen, some detail for the ship's wheels and the binoculars. Right, so these go on those vents, so that'll make them look a little bit more authentic. Vent covers, we've got a compass to go inside the compass. Replacement pedals, foot pedals on the guns, and then some little bits of detail to add onto the guns themselves. So, as is Edward's way, lots of additional add-ons. Not much in the way of replacement, one or two little bits, but not a huge amount of work, I don't think. So, some nice little additions there. So, there we have it, the Italeri Schnellboot Type S-38 in 1/35 scale. So, what are my first impressions? Well, you know, I think the subject matter is really interesting. It's different, you know, a fast attack boat with torpedoes. It's very cool. At this scale, at 1/35 scale, it's absolutely crying out for super detailing and weathering. So that will be my intention. So there's a lot of research needed to be done around it to see how the crew used it. You know, did they have pets on board? Did they have mascots? Where did the weathering, sort of the paint chipping and stuff happen? How well maintained were they? You know, did they have other flags other than just the national insignia flag on? You know, did they have other parts of the boat covered in stowage, in additional rubber dinghies, that sort of stuff? You know, how were they used? So there's a lot of research to do around this before you get to build it, I think. I think some parts are clearly showing their age, whereas the photo etch and the glazing are nice new additions. I think generally all the parts are good and clear and crisp. What we might be lacking in one or two places is a little bit of extra detail. And Edward cover off some of that, but I suspect not all of it. And there'll be more we can do in the way of ropes and tarpaulins and that sort of stuff. The three paint options are a little bit disappointing. They're not really three different paint options. the 3 different decal options. Again, I think it would have been nice to have seen one of the various camouflage options. There were a number of different camouflages used during the war. It would have been nice to have one of those options, but you can do your research and do it yourself. So assuming that the basic model is dimensionally okay, I think you've got a great base to work on. So yeah, I think it's a really nice kit, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that at some point. I hope that was helpful and interesting. So keep well everyone, enjoy your modelling, and I will be back very soon.